Mass Effect Andromeda has a seriously impressive legacy behind it. The first Mass Effect was released 10 years ago, back in 2007, and was followed up with two even more impressive sequels, Mass Effect 2 and 3. Mass Effect 3 concluded the original trilogy 5 years ago. Since then, BioWare have been busy working on Andromeda, a game which doesn't necessarily directly follow up on the original trilogy, but acts as a sort of semi-reboot, in that you don't have to be at all familiar with the original story, although there are references there. Mass Effect Andromeda is an action RPG. The RPG element comes into various tech trees and character interaction throughout several large and expansive hub areas. The action portion comes courtesy of a third-person cover shooter. Now, as this is a spoiler-free review, give us a brief rundown of the scenario that covers, say, the first hour or so of the game.
Well, you soon find yourselves in the shoes of a Pathfinder for the Andromeda Initiative. Now, you're tasked with finding mankind and the rest of the Milky Way galaxy a new home. You travel 600 years through deep space, and upon your arrival you immediately run into difficulties.
Indeed, and it's these difficulties that are the narrative's principal hook. And it is a very good hook. I found it pulled me immediately into the game's stories as soon as it became apparent, which it does quickly, that all is not going to plan. The original trilogy looked okay graphically, but we're 5 years on from that now. How does this game look?
I mean, the graphics are absolutely stunning, especially on PC, and they make all the planets a pleasure to explore.
I think it's worth mentioning at this point, in fact reiterating, you did mention that the game looks absolutely stunning on PC. It still looks fairly nice on the consoles, but we have heard word of issues with the PlayStation 4 and the Xbox One version. Exactly, yes, frame rates. So if you do actually have a choice between playing the game on the PC and the console, we would recommend the PC. Now, it looks very nice. How does it sound?
Well, the soundtrack adds to the amazing atmosphere of the game. Now, you can't mention sound without mentioning voice acting, and unfortunately about half of voice acting leaves a lot to be desired and can come across a bit wooden.
Yeah, and I think the main guilty parties in this are a lot of the bit part actors, the actors that don't necessarily have the most amount of lines in the game. If you look at the main characters, so when you actually start playing, you can choose to either customise your own character of either gender, or you can choose a male rider or a female rider that's been pre-configured to look how BioWare intended. Now, we both played with male rider, and his voice acting was very good. So good, in fact, I actually thought it was Nolan North. And
so to be honest, we both thought that.
It was incredible, wasn't it? And actually,
really was.
BioWare have actually hired a few celebrities to voice some of the characters, with somewhat mixed results. I found it quite distracting, for example, that the administrator of the main space station in the Andromeda Galaxy is voiced by Dinesh from Silicon Valley, because even though he's an alien, he sounded exactly like Dinesh from Silicon Valley. And that was actually quite distracting. Let's talk about gameplay. How's it play, and is it fun?
Well, it's very fun. I mean, for core third-person shooting, it's absolutely spot on. And although it is a cover shooter, cover is not always needed. I mean, it's less of a cover shooter than Mass Effect 2 and 3. And it can be great fun not using cover and getting up close and personal using a variety of melee, tech, and biotic powers like the flamethrower or ice thrower, and gravity effect and biotics, which are like the force powers from Star Wars. It's easy to move around the battlefield with a jump jet.
It's worth pointing out at this point as well, if you play games like this purely for the story, you do actually get the option at the beginning with a difficulty slider. You can either bump up the third-person cover shooting, so there's quite a lot of challenge there. You can have it so it's, sort of like normal difficulties, there's like a balance between action and the roleplay. Or you can basically put it into a virtual story mode where you do still undergo the third-person cover shooting, but it really lowers the difficulty of that. Now, it's an absolutely huge game, I think that's fair to say. Like most action RPGs, there is a core story that you can follow at your leisure, and there is of course lots of side activities. There has been some criticism of the side quests. Have you found that this has borne fruit in your playthrough?
Not really. I mean, yes, some of the side quests aren't as fun as others, but I found the vast majority of them actually fun side quests, which I enjoyed doing, so much I was just roaming around planets in the Nomad, going from side quest to side quest before finishing the story arc on each planet.
Indeed, and the Nomad, just to explain, is Mass Effect Andromeda's version of the Mako from Mass Effect 1. It's basically like a moon buggy. The only difference is this time it doesn't actually control like a battleship this time. It is actually quite fun to speed around the planets with. The difficulty with criticising the side quests is that I have seen criticism that a lot of them are a bit like glorified fetch quests, but I think what that fails to appreciate is that hanging on those fetch quests are actually quite interesting nuggets of story that add a lot of texture and depth to the overall story.
Yeah, absolutely, and obviously there's shooting in between sections of the side quests as well, and the core reason I was doing them was more for story than the gameplay, because I was enjoying the story of the side quests. And another thing as well was obviously for crafting and for menus, they were a bit of a pain to navigate. There was too many subfolders to go through, and it was too much of a chore to learn. Although I did eventually force myself to learn these subfolders and folders to navigate all the menus, it should have just been a bit easier.
I found as well that the menus were an absolute mess of exclamation marks indicating that there were new things within them. But it was really difficult to sort of identify what the new things within each drill down menu was.
Absolutely. That is by far one of the biggest issues of the game, I would say.
So speaking of issues, let's talk about the much discussed technical issues.
Well, for me, the main one was the bad facial animations, which can make the lip sync look off. On the other hand, it didn't necessarily take the enjoyment out of the game for me. I mean, for a short period of time it might have, but after, a few hours, I stopped noticing them.
And this is the real key, really, isn't it? Because as much mileage as these... And actually some of the facial animation, I'm not going to beat around the bush, some of the facial animation is bewilderingly terrible. But as much as that does make for some, fun YouTube compilation videos, you're quite right, it does actually, after a while, you do actually stop noticing it. Although it is very distracting almost at first, once you do actually get into the story, and once you do, I suppose, come to terms with the fact that the game's cast is going to be pulling weird gurning faces at you throughout, then you do actually get past it with some ease, I found later on.
No, absolutely. I mean, it's not something you keep noticing throughout the game. It's not something every time you have a conversation you think, God, that's annoying. Or at least I didn't think that.
Right, let's make like a rider and bring this ship home. What are the good points?
I mean, the overall story was intriguing. It kept me interested the whole way through. By far the worst of it was in the first 3 hours with all the meets and greets. I mean, there were so many conversations to do in the first 3 hours where you just wanted to get down to some core gameplay. But after them first 3 hours, it just got so fun. And although it may not have had the impossible decisions with dire consequences of Mass Effect 1, 2 and 3, it still felt epic overall.
This is the thing, it did still have the sweep and grandeur of, you could tell it had had a lot of money spent on it, despite the technical issues. The story actually was definitely good enough to bring you in, like the very best space operas that we've seen. So what are the bad points?
Well, obviously there's the facial animations, the bad menus to sort through. And although the story did feel epic, it didn't quite feel as grand as Mass Effect 1, 2 and 3.
Okay, so let's give this thing a score.
I'm going to have to say 86%.
Indeed, and I think the main issue to take away from this is that although there are some very well discussed now technical issues with the game, and yes, we will acknowledge that those technical issues should not have been there, they're not becoming of a publisher with as much money as EA have and a development house with as much prestige as BioWare. The fact is, these technical issues ultimately do not affect the enjoyment of the game to any real degree. And there is so much enjoyment to be had in this game that actually we're very comfortable giving the game a score that, on our review scale, is very good.
I just feel everyone has almost jumped on the hate it bandwagon.
I have to say, I do believe if the original Mass Effect trilogy didn't exist, Mass Effect Andromeda would not have received anywhere near the kicking that it's received from our reviewing colleagues. And I do suspect that a little bit of perspective has been lost in actually the quality of this game and how good an experience it provides in terms of the story and in terms of the combat and in terms of the overall cohesiveness of what are actually two very diverse genres when taken by themselves. And that is the basis for our score.